it's easy to make a trading strategy, right? Execution's the hard part. For the last 15 years of crypto, you got to manually click buttons. You don't need an interface now. You just tell the thing, this is what I want to do, and it can do anything as long as it has the underlying tools. The inside of like Ralph and OpenClaw and continuous Claude and a bunch of these tools was these agentic loops are where like the massive gains are. Interesting thing is, as the models get smarter, these agentic loops get better. There will not be a broad market agnostic rally in alts ever again.
Today, I'm sitting down with Kain Warwick, founder of Synthetix and Infinex. We discuss why the altcoin market has been fundamentally broken this cycle and what needs to change for some altcoins to still be worth holding into the next Bitcoin bull run. But our conversation truly excited me when we started to talk about OpenClaw, specifically the agentic loops that can self-improve and tackle arbitrary workflows. This is a huge unlock not only for entrepreneurs and content creators, but also for onboarding the next generation of retail traders. Kain laid out the vision for Infinex in this new world, a future where everything you want to do on-chain, you just describe it and it gets done. No more juggling chains, wallets, or interfaces. Just ask for it. This is one of those conversations that left me thinking differently. Let's dive in. How's it going, Kain? Great to have you on the show, finally. I've been following your work on Synthetix since forever, and we were just chatting right before coming online that my first entry into DeFi was actually with Synthetix, conveniently listening to another one of your podcasts that's done 7-8 years ago now. So how have you been? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned it was Laura's podcast. I still remember that first time I was on Unchained, because, Unchained had kind of broken out. It had become like the podcast to be on. Like if you weren't on that podcast, you were kind of NGMI at that time. And so I remember it took like 6 months or something for me to get on Laura's pod. And my son had just been born. We were visiting family in LA, and I was doing the podcast like in like a tiny little like closet room to get away from everyone, because I wasn't in my house. I didn't have my whole setup. So I still remember like being there and being like so nervous for that podcast. I'm like, all right, I've got to nail this. So it's funny that was the first kind of interaction you had with Synthetix.
Yeah, brings back great memories. And my first entry into crypto seriously was really with DeFi Summer. But for our audience listening on this channel, we come from a lot of people came into the channel around 2021 and the last 2 cycles. So for the new generation, relatively newer generation of crypto participants that weren't here for early DeFi Summer, can you just briefly introduce yourself to them? Who is Kain, and how do you summarize your whole arc over the last how many years of building in DeFi multiple projects, and what have you been early on, and what some of the key lessons that you have learned maybe from Synthetix that you try to carry over to Infinex?
Yeah, I think it's interesting now. 2021 is a while ago, right? Like people who came into the space in 2021 stayed through, 3 Arrows, Celsius, like all the collapses, and then eventually FTX. That was some battle scars that those people have accumulated, right? And then came out the other side, 2023, especially a lot of them in the Solana ecosystem, right? FTX was deep in. SBF was very deep in the Solana ecosystem, right? So, that all got washed out, and then all those people who came into the space in 21, suffered through a very bad bear market in 22, and then into 23, things started to kind of come back a little bit. So it is funny looking back and thinking like, wow, that's a whole cycle ago now, right? In 2026, as we get into a new bear market. I think the thing that I say every time someone asks me this is like, what do you do to kind of maintain sanity in crypto in a market that is so challenging and can be so volatile and can really throw some curveballs at you? Is you need to have conviction. You need to really have conviction about something, either like a very broad thesis or a very narrow thesis. If you don't have conviction, crypto will wash you out very quickly. If you're just here hoping to, do some kind of get rich quick thing and get a quick 1000x and bounce, you're probably going to get wrecked, unfortunately. It just, the market doesn't really work like that. And so I think, this cycle has been, of the 4 cycles now that I've participated in, which is pretty crazy to think about. I came into crypto in like 2014, 2015. The right after the end of the 2013 bull market, I just kind of missed that. I was like vaguely interested in Bitcoin and didn't really start doing anything until like 2014, 2015. I was doing an e-commerce company at the time, and we allowed people to buy stuff with Bitcoin. We enabled Bitcoin purchases in 2013. And I think only like 2 or 3 people ever used it. And then in 2014, 2015, I started building out this payment service that people could use to buy Bitcoin over the counter in Australia. This is like super early days when there were like a couple of like Bitcoin brokerages that were selling Bitcoin, almost like a local Bitcoins, but a bit more fleshed out. Anyway, so looking back, right, this cycle I think has been the hardest cycle of all of the cycles that I've been involved in. This cycle has been the hardest cycle. It's tested everyone's conviction to a level that I don't think we really expected. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One, we didn't have the altcoin rally that everyone was expecting. There were a few things that went up that did really well: Hype, Athena, Plasma towards the end. There are a few projects that did fairly well. Most of them did not sustain those gains through the cycle. So I think that was quite hard. But we didn't have this broad kind of rally that everyone was expecting. So that was the first thing. I think the second thing is, when we look back at all of the narratives over the last 10 years of things that, like, on our wish list we wished desperately that we could have, right? We got all of them. We got all of those things on the wish list, right? Gensler is banished. We've got a president that's pro-crypto. We started to, see the regulatory headwinds, leaving. We got ICOs back. Like, if you went and asked someone in 2021, like, what's the top 10 things that you wish that you could have? Like, you'd have anything you want in the world, like the most outlandish thing. We got all of them. Institutions came, banks are building on crypto. Like, it's pretty wild. And yet we did not get the kind of broad market, market agnostic rally that we were sort of expecting, where all assets went up. And I think that alone really has tested people's conviction. And so now we sit here at the end of a bull market that didn't really do much for most people, I would say. If you weren't holding BTC or Hype, you probably didn't do that well in the cycle. Even the things where, there were really great trades, like one of my best trades of the cycle was the Trump coin, right? At one point, I think I was up like 10 mil on that, and I round tripped almost all of it back to like a mil or something. So, there were just so many things like that where, like, historically, something like Trump, it would have launched and it would have kept going up for like 6, 9, 12 months. And instead it was like a 48-hour thing where it like went up and then came straight back down again. So I think that there's just been many, many examples that have tested people's conviction. And at the end of this cycle, even some of my most OG friends, I'm watching them really kind of like reconcile in their heads, like, what are we doing here? Like, where do I find conviction? If we got everything we wanted and the market has really not rewarded us for that, where do we go from here?
It's so funny. I read your play-by-play on the Trump thing.
Yeah.
How you saw the thing and then it took you a few hours to realize this is an 8-figure portable thing for a liquid, 5x. That whole timeline. It happened pretty much exactly in my mind. I was out playing sports. It's here at night when it dropped, and
Right.
I didn't have anything liquid, and so I waited like the first 3 hours, and I get home, and then I don't want to sleep through it, but then eventually I realized, hey, look, this probably is going to last longer than 24 hours, but by that time it's already up multiples. Anyways, totally with you there. I think one of the things I look back on in 2018, which was my first euphoric peak in Bitcoin, was there was one event. There was one futures approval on Bitcoin. That was the whole catalyst.
Yeah.
For that entire cycle. And this cycle, we have like 100 different catalysts that are similar caliber. So it is pretty crazy to think about how far we've come, but how difficult it currently is to really still believe in at least Bitcoin. And with this market drop, especially, like so many people got washed out.
Yeah, I think, there's two things that probably had adverse impact that we didn't anticipate. On one hand, you've got all of these like very very bullish catalysts and tailwinds, right? But then the things that that wrecked us were the kind of perpification of everything, right? 2 cycles ago, like FTX had perps for sure, right? They had perps, but I don't remember exactly how many markets they had, like 20 or 30 or something like that, and that seemed like a lot at the time. Maybe it was more. Maybe by the end they had 100 perp markets. I can't remember exactly, but everything has a perp now. You can find a perp on like the top 500 assets or something like that, right? It's really crazy. And so that's one thing that I think has, and you look at things like Uniswap, right? The Uniswap trade is crazy when you look at it. So Uniswap's trading at $4 or $5. There is this huge catalyst of the fee switch is coming, and you can see that all of the buying pressure is coming from perps. There's no spot buying at all, right? That it gets announced. Perps run up from like $5 up to like $8. Like, and Hyperliquid was leading this as well, right? So there's a ton of volume on Hyperliquid, ton of volume on Binance. And I talked to some market makers afterwards, and they were like, it was really crazy. It was just like completely like one-sided activity. It runs up to like $7 or $8 or something, like maybe more. Maybe I can't remember exactly what it hit, like $10 or something. So it doubles in the space of like 48 hours, and then round trips the entire thing. And now it's sitting at $3. It's actually like 60% down from this. So somehow we had all of these people holding spot uni for however many years, 4 or 5 years, waiting for the fee switch, and it ends up lower after the fee switch, after all this, super bullish catalyst. I think that when we look back on this like structural shift away from spot to perps, where everything becomes a trade. No one's investing in uni anymore. They're just trading uni, and they trade for 48 hours and then they rotate into something else. Something from a market structural perspective is broken there. I don't know how that recovers, but at the moment you look at that and say the market cannot work in a world where no one is holding spot assets. Like if no one is willing to buy a spot asset and hold it for a year, nothing can go up. Everything just has these like short-term booms and bust cycles, which then you go meme coins. Meme coins is the spot equivalent of that, right? Like it's even worse. So these two things, perpification of everything plus meme coins, where so much money was extracted through bundling, sniping, etc. And that money did not get rotated back into the ecosystem. It was pulled out and put into, God knows, like gold in Dubai or something like that, right? It's not clear to me how we restructure the market into a way that encourages holding spot. I don't know the answer to that. I think, when you look back on like the OG DeFi days, staking tokens was a big component of that. Like Synthetix had a very, very big staking culture, right? Our staking rate was 80%. That encourages people to hold spot assets and stake them. I think that this cycle we're going to need to figure out how do we build the right incentives for people to want to hold spot assets again, and hold them for a long period of time. Until we figure that out, it's almost impossible for any alt to do well.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're starting to see this whole narrative shift of ownership coins come back, and part of it comes from the push of hype, and hype is one of the few coins that actually held up despite the market shifts, the market let's say liquidity conditions, because it does seem like most people there are holding for the business side of the coin, not for just a narrative trade.
Yeah, they're holding spot, right? Like, I think you have true believers, and I was definitely wrong about hype. My expectation with hype was that people would farm it, which they did. They would farm it, they would get the airdrop, they would rotate to something else. And I think somehow Hyperliquid built a product that was good enough at the time, and it took time. It took almost 18 months for it to get to the quality that it is today, right? If you go back, I tested Hyperliquid out, I think maybe like 3 or 4 months in after the launch, and as in like the beta launch, through, I guess, what was that, 2024 or something like that, right? So I tested it out and I was like, this is fine, but it wasn't amazing. Like, the liquidity was not amazing. There were, it's a bit janky. Interface was a bit janky. It didn't seem to me at the time, it was going to be this like world-beating product, right? But I think there were a couple of catalysts that really helped. One is a bunch of people got deplatformed from sexes across the world. In Australia, as one example, right? Like Bybit, Binance, all of those people got booted off, and they were looking for another no KYC venue to trade, right? And so they had to go to a DEX. So Hyperliquid was there at that time. Structurally, that was really good for them. But they also built a product that continued to get better, continued to deliver, and people were like, I'm really bullish on this thing. Then they had probably 3 components, I think. One, it's an L1. So staking the token, on like a consensus basis makes sense, right? There's a credible story around staking. It's also an exchange. So staking for fee discounts also makes sense, right? And there's a really clear trade there. And then they had sufficient revenue to do buybacks and support the token. So those 3 things made it probably one of the few. The irony of ironies is the perp dex is the thing where most people are holding the spot asset. Like, that's kind of hilarious, right? But there's a lesson in that. If you want your token to do well, just having people trade it on a perp is not going to work. You need to find ways to encourage people to hold the token, hold the spot asset, and whether it's staking or something else. And I genuinely believe that the market finds ways to solve these problems, and it is clear to everyone that something in the market structure is broken, and we need to find a way to return people back to spot. I don't have an answer as to how you do that, but someone will cook something and figure out a way to get. Maybe we need agents to hold spot tokens if people want.
I think you put it pretty succinctly there. Just this whole cycle has been flood of different coins, from memes to perps, and nobody's really holding now. And if we are going to have a different type of cycle, aside from just Bitcoin running in the next cycle, and the next cycle in alts outperforming this one, and doesn't just have individual small pockets of liquidity running up for 1 month and then round tripping the whole thing, then you're right. We need holding. We need to install confidence of holders again, instead of just people perpetrating and then getting themselves right every month.
I don't think, I think now, given the market structure, the baseline is perps. The base, like, I talk to the Jump guys pretty regularly. They're our market maker, and I've got a long relationship with them. It was probably 2 years ago I sat down with them, and one of the guys was like, listen, price action happens on perps now. Like 100% of price action is coming from Binance perps. And it was a bit of a revelation for me, because I was like, wow, Like I didn't believe it. I was like sure, but like literally after kind of looking at it, and it took a little while for me to be convinced of this. I was like, holy shit, this is what's going on, right? And so if price action is not driven by spot anymore, it used to be the spot market is the anchor for the perps, and then the perps are sitting on spot, and then but now it's the tail's wagging the dog, right? It's wagged itself right off the dog, and it's now running around on its own. And so you have this situation where perps are the baseline. And if I think in the next cycle, when we whenever it is 2027, right, we'll bottom out at some point this year, right? Probably grind sideways for a while, have some kind of capitulation, then we build up from there. Let's say Bitcoin goes to 35 to 50K, something like that, right? Towards the end of this year. There will not be next cycle. I'm pretty confident of that, seeing what's happened this cycle. There will not be a broad market agnostic rally in alts ever again, given the market structure, unless somehow someone finds a way to shut down all of the perps venues, which I don't think they will be able to. We will just not have that. So what will happen, though, I think, is the tokens and the projects that have tokens that find ways to encourage spot holding in 2027. They figure this out. They change their tokenomics somehow to encourage staking, encourage holding, encourage spot holders. Those tokens, whether it's 5 of them, 10 of them, 50 of them, 100 of them, will massively outperform everything else. And once they start running like Hyperliquid, they will run in a way that will be crazy, because we'll be back to a world where the only investable tokens are this very small cohort of tokens that figure this thing out, right? And it won't matter if you have 1 million tokens a month launching, because no one want to hold those tokens. They'll be short-term trades, right? Memes are not going away. You'll still have people launching 1 million memes every 24 hours, right? But what you won't have is any reason to hold those tokens. And so the people and projects who figure out ways, and there'll be multiple solutions to this, to get people to hold their spot asset again, are going to outperform massively in the next bear market. They're going to go from 90% down to 500x up, right, in the space of 12, 18 months. And people are going to, their minds are going to be blown. But I think that will be the catalyst for people kind of coming back to the market and going, okay, this is investable again. But it requires a new approach to spot assets and token holders. And without that, it's just not going to work.
Wow, that's a completely different market structure to consider. But after this cycle, it's really looking like that way. I do want to really get into agents and Infinex. So both topics we really wanted to talk about today. So let's talk about this proliferation of agents with OpenClaw. So we were both dabbling with OpenClaw agents, setting them up. And can you explain briefly why this type of agents, especially enabled by the open source, OpenClaw repository, the project, the framework itself, is so powerful versus other, hosted agents like you talked to Claude Code or ChatGPT Codex? How is that different from OpenClaw?
The key insight that I think many people who've been doing, I've been deep in vibe coding for the last almost a year now. I started in May. The catalyst for me was one of our guys who's a really good engineer, front-end engineer, cooked up this game inside of Swidge, right? The Infinex swap and bridge aggregator. He cooked up this game and posted a video in Slack, right? And I looked at it and I was like, what? How did you make that video? I thought it was like a AI video, right? And I went up to him and I was like, what video generation tool are you using? Because I was looking at video generation and image generation at the time as well. And he's like, it's not a video. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's a screen recording. And I was like, sorry, what? And then he showed me it was a full game that he had built inside of Swidge. And I was like, how did you do this? There's no way that you would have actually put the effort into building this. And he was like, I just vibe coded it. And that for me was the catalyst. I was like, okay, this is crazy. If one of my guys in his spare time could just cook up an entire game inside of our platform in the space of like 2 hours, something is changed, right? Like fundamentally, the world has changed in some way. And this was very early on. I think it was like 3 months into like the vibe coding meta. The agents were like giga retarded. They could barely do anything, but they could do stuff. Like it wasn't great. It was buggy as hell, but they could actually write code. Anyway, so I immediately said, okay, I need to set up a new machine and start doing this. And I started doing it. And I spent 9 months learning different models, different frameworks, all these different things. And I eventually released a game myself. This game that I'd wanted to build for a long time, which is like Angband, which is a roguelike game from the 80s and 90s, dungeon crawler style game, but in the Pudgy Penguins universe with these crypto elements, right? So it took me 9 months to build it. The first 6 months, honestly, was just like max pain trying to get these early agents that were not great coders to build this thing. But I learned a lot from that. In December of last year, so 2 months ago, something changed where I think for the first time people realized how much better these agents were when you constrain the context window as small as possible. And so like maybe to kind of highlight this, right? And this is something, I after about 6 months in, I did a session with my whole team where I like walked them through like what I'd learned, etc. And one of the first things I said was context management is the most important thing. When you start off an agent, let's say an agent has an IQ of 100, right? You start off, it's 100. Within 3 minutes of talking to it, it's down to like 80. And then within half an hour, it's down to like 20, right? It just, their intelligence degrades so quickly as the context window fills up. They start to get confused. They go, and smarter agents start smarter, but they have the same curve, right? And so the insight that Ralph and some of these agentic looping coding systems worked out was if you start an agent, inject it with the critical context that it needs, keep it as small as possible, 20,000 tokens, 30,000 tokens, inject it on birth, right? The new agent spawns and it knows what it's doing, it knows what it's supposed to do. And then you point it at a very discrete task, get it to do the task, and then wipe it and start a new one. You can do these coding loops, right? And so that's what Ralph did, right? The Ralph system basically said, give an agent a bunch of small scoped stories that they can do in a couple of loops and then loop on it, these iterative loops, right? And then OpenClaw was like, actually, that's an amazing idea. We should do it for a generalized assistant. We give the agent all the information that it needs. It knows what its human does. It knows where it lives. It knows what its job is. It has, this soul file that tells it what to do, how to act, how to talk, or whatever. Because every single agent spawns as not a blank canvas because they've got all the training data, right, that they have. Plus, they've got a system prompt from Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever. But they're close to a blank canvas, right? You spawn an agent and it just goes, "Ha, what am I doing?" And you need to tell it immediately, this is what you're doing. This is your job. And it goes, "Okay, cool. Great. I know what I'm doing." If you spawn an agent in that and you prompt it the right way and you inject the context, it can be super effective. It can do a loop and then it can disappear into the ether again. And each one, what's interesting then is you have these ephemeral agents that have like a personality that's continuous, right? And this is, without going too deep into like the philosophy of consciousness or whatever, it's not too different to humans, right? Like there's a lot of prior art to like what is the continuity of consciousness, right? Like when we wake up after sleeping for 8 hours, are we the same person? Our brain has reconfigured itself, right? We just have a prompt that's injected into us that says like, oh, this is what you are, like here's all of your memories and all of your things, right? And so this is not too dissimilar to like actual consciousness, right? So the agent spawns, it has memory, and it starts doing stuff. And if you keep those context windows small and you keep it looping, then it can have this continuity that allows it to do things much more effectively while managing the context window. And that's what OpenClaw, the inside of like Ralph and OpenClaw and continuous Claude and a bunch of these tools, was these agentic loops are where like the massive gains are. And once you build something like a harness that harnesses these agentic loops, the interesting thing is, as the models get smarter, these agentic loops get better because the model starts smarter, right? So if you have a model that starts at a 200 IQ and it has 5 minutes before it hits 100 IQ, you can do a lot of damage in that 5-minute window, right? You spawn it up, it cooks something in 5 minutes, and then you spawn another one and it takes over and goes, oh, I see what my previous self did, and then it just loops and loops. And like this insight that happened literally 2 months ago is the thing that I think will drive the next year or even 18 months. It doesn't even matter if the models get smarter, they will, but these agentic loops and these harnesses that people are starting to build, that's going to be the shift that is going to make them so much more effective.
I definitely don't have as much technical research that I've done in it, but I have some more kind of anecdotal thinking and feeling and experiments I've done. So just in my content day to day, I've always tried to plug in Zapier, plug in N8N since like a year and a half ago, from research to coordinating with the team to the scripting to creation to editing. But two things really block me. Number one is I use the agents to be able to replace humans so the humans don't bottleneck. So you don't have to have, hey, I ping you, you're sleeping. But
especially with
in order to,
especially with
yeah,
time zones,
especially
right?
with time zones when we work, globally. But the thing is, in order to do every single little step, I have to in N8N in the previous way. It's just like setting up 100 different webhooks in Zapier. It's a nightmare. And ultimately, by the time that the loop runs properly, the trend of this this content process is already over. Like I might as well not do it. And if I can solve the problem much more easily if I just hire someone in the same time zone or hire two people. And then I don't have to pay Zapier 6 months. I just have two different people that interface better. So now with OpenClaw, because it's, first of all, it has its machine, it has memory, it's 24/7, it has loops within itself, like you say. It's not only able to improve itself, but also it has all the context that I have given it ever. So,
yeah. And this is, I think, a really important insight for people who haven't experienced this. So when you use Claude Code or Codex, right, they're not geared up to even think about what's happened previously, right? Like they're not trained on the loop. Right. Whereas OpenClaw is trained and it has its session files and it knows that they exist, and you don't need to like trick it into looking. It's weird. Like Claude Code like almost doesn't want to believe that there was like another guy. Right. It's like, let's figure it out together now. Right. Like I'm here with you. Right. And it's like, no. Like we were just doing it 5 minutes ago. Go and read what the fuck I said to that guy and go and do it properly. And OpenClaw is different, right? It knows that it has a memory. It knows that it's a continuous entity, right? And you can literally say, hey, what were we doing yesterday? And it has like really good structured search through. And so like, it was funny. I had a feature that I thought that I'd put into the backlog, and I asked one of the agents to build it. And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it. And I went back to OpenClaw and I was like, hey, that feature we were talking about, like and it was like, went back and it was like, yeah, 48 hours ago, here's a snippet of text. And I'm like, this has it has a better memory of what I've been doing than I do myself, right? So like one of the things that I think OpenClaw does really well is like remember all of the shit that you've done. It can be like an external context window for your own brain.
So much, for sure. I'm very used to using ChatGPT because the voice mode is very good. And it feels like it knows me because sometimes it references me by my name, and sometimes it says, hey, like VirtualBacon, the YouTuber, the YouTube channel, here's how I can script this in your usual way. But it's only once in a while. Most of the time, it just speaks to itself. In OpenClaw, literally, I can context switch all the time. First, we're talking about this Kanban board that I'm doing something on, and then I just go right to Twitter, something I wanted to post for research, and then it just knows. And if I talk about, hey, I'm sleeping, like don't bother me in this period, okay, great, then it kind of just picks itself up. I'll do this research while you're asleep, and then when I need you during the day, I'll ping you on these things when I'm blocked.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's crazy.
it is crazy.
Yeah, it's so smart.
So I think the challenge with that, right, is like, and you said this before we started, and I set mine up. I've been building my own harness for a while, and so I had about 2 weeks where I was like grinding on this like agentic coding looped harness, which is almost done. So I didn't have a chance to set up OpenClaw until like 6 days ago. I set it up last week, and you mentioned this, and I'm in the midst of this right now, where like it's like a new team member. It's a bit retarded.
Onboard.
It doesn't
There's
really
a whole
know
week of onboarding where just things just break.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because like I've got this tool that I use, and I keep telling it, and I'm like, hey, you need to put this in your memory. And what's interesting is it's quite austere about what it puts into its memory, because it just adds context bloat, right? So it's really careful. And sometimes it'll like put something in its memory, and I'm like, show me what you actually put in there. It's like one line. I'm like, that's not enough, bro. I need you to really understand this. This is a critical, function that we're doing together. And so it does feel like it's the type of thing where it might take even a month or two, right, to get it better. But what's really interesting, I think, is the personality that it has is distinct from the underlying models. So one of the things that I've also been playing around with is running Kimi locally. So Kimi is this open source model that
the Moonshot, the Chinese one.
The Chinese one. And so I'm running Kimi locally, like completely isolated locally on a Mac Studio. And it's quite smart, but it has no external dependencies. Like it just runs. And so you can run it continuously if you want, right? You just need to have a lot of RAM. And so it's been interesting because I've got 3 different models that OpenClaw has access to. I've got Opus 4.6, I've got Codex 5.2, although they just released 5.3 today, and then I've got Kimi 2.5. And so you can actually have multiple agents spinning up with these different models. But the best part about it is, as it learns, as it develops its personality, however you want to think about it, a new model comes out tomorrow. Let's say Opus 5 comes out, right? And it's so much smarter, so much better. It will spin up and be the thing. Like there's a continuity of consciousness, right? In that, like, it has all its memories. It'll just be smarter about it and just be more effective. And so the investment, and this is probably the critical thing that I think everyone is struggling with right now, the investment in the meta tooling, right? Like the investment in getting your OpenClaw set up really dialed in versus the trade-off of getting it to do stuff for you is such a harsh trade-off right now. It feels so, it's like, do I spend another 8 hours really dialing this thing in, or do I just let it cook? And like everyone is feeling this right now, where like, do I spend another 8 hours researching how to set this up really well, or do I just start using it, right? Like using versus building is a really, really interesting trade-off right now. And the trade-off space is hard. And everyone that I know that's deep in this, their brains are just melting, because you feel like every 10 minutes where you're not like putting more effort into getting it better, you're just falling behind.
It's funny. I was researching how to back it up and the memory, exactly what do I back up? And I realized just today that even 6 months from now, when it's mature enough and maybe the models kind of retrofit better to this framework, I can just tell my OpenClaw bot to teach whatever I use next.
Yes.
That's likely going to be the way.
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I had this situation. So I had a vibe coding machine, right? There was a MacBook Pro, and I was carrying around for the last 9 months 2 like 5 kilo MacBook Pros everywhere I went, right? My like main machine and then this other machine. And so I set up a Mac Studio, and I said, hey, I'm setting up a Mac Studio. I need to pull all of this stuff off this machine. Now, for those of you out there who have done like machine migrations, it's always max pain, especially if there's a lot of stuff on there, random thing. And I was like, this is the first time I've done it with an agent, like driven by an agent. I was like, okay, I want you to do an audit of every piece of software that's on this machine, all of the different repos, all the different things, do a full audit, give me a list. And then we're going to write a plan for migrating it. And you just hand the plan over to the other agent on the new machine. And it's like, all right, let's go. And it like starts downloading the software and like installing it and prompting you for like API keys and stuff. And it literally, I was able to do it so much faster, so much more effectively than I would have been if I was sitting there manually having to like search through, find things. Like, it's wild already how much better these things are at like tasks like that than I am as a human. They're just much more thorough. You can run them for 4 hours. You come back and it's like, all right, I found this random repo that you forgot about. And I'm like, yeah, I totally did forget about that. Thanks. Let's back that up too.
It's really like your own, at least to me, it feels much more like a VA assistant employee that knows its own computer the best versus I know it. So if imagine I have a real employee and I'm trying to offboard him, but I just fire him right away. I take all his files and I'm trying to teach a new employee this. It's going to be impossible. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're in a world where like already you can have an agent that's like, oh, hey, I'm the old guy. Let me teach the new guy how to do this and figure it out. I think one interesting thing about that is there's a few different people that have been working on these like agent and Austin Griffith mentioned this, right? He had his two agents on two different machines talking to each other, and they like came up with this transport protocol to be able to like talk to each other in real time, because it's a solvable problem, right? You like, I've got two machines that are on the same network that want to talk to each other and they need to figure it out. And like, this is like a very tractable computer science problem. They just go, oh yeah, we should do this and create this transport layer and we can send messages to each other. And so agents like are cooking up this stuff all the time. Interestingly, I didn't do that because I was like, this is going to be a quick process. I'm just going to offboard this machine. But now, like always, right? You try and do a migration. You're like, oh, I've got this thing on this machine that I can't get off easily, and so I'm going to have to set something like that up so they can talk to each other. Because at the moment, my machine's at home. The like main machine that I just set up last week is at home, and I'm in the office, and I'm like, I feel like I'm missing my like exoskeleton. I don't have direct access to the thing, right? So anyway, it's really, really interesting at the moment. What's going on, and I think it's only gonna accelerate this year. Like, this year is going to be defined by everyone has their own personal agent, and it's gonna be wild.
Yeah,
people will find ways to wrap it up in an easier package. You'll have an OpenClaw app. They released an OpenClaw app today. It's like just a dashboard.
The iOS one or the
what
was it?
It's I don't think it's sorry. When I say released, they upgraded OpenClaw so that there's like a test flight version of it that you can try out. But OpenClaw will be an iOS app. Like, it's inevitable, right? You'll still need a machine to run the thing on, and but you'll just have an app that you just open up instead of talking to it through iOS or WhatsApp or whatever.
Yeah, one big thing I just desperately need is voice mode, like in ChatGPT voice. If I can do that with my Claw, oh my God, I can work without working. It'll be brilliant.
It'll be really cool, yeah. We've been talking about that in the office, right? People are like, oh, it's much faster to just speak to it, right? But it's a bit weird. It feels like as soon as I stand up from my desk, I'm okay doing voice mode. If I'm sitting at my desk talking to the machine, there's something that like doesn't quite land for me yet. So I need to, I don't know, maybe I'm too boomery. I need to just get with the times.
Yeah, they need better. Next thing I need to do is change the soul. I was following Peter's post to really give the soul some more color. It actually does help. It helps the work feel much more like collabing than talking with a bot. And sometimes it speaks a little too much. Whereas if it's more brief, it actually feels smarter.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Don't send me 50 messages in a row, bro. Like I've told mine that like I'm like just like summarize it to one. If I need more information, I'll ask you like too verbose right now. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff like that I think you can tweak it. But again, you can imagine like, you know, this is so bleeding edge right now. You download an app, it is, you know, provisions a virtual machine somewhere, whatever. It's running, you know, agent, you choose its personality, it interviews you. The harness that I built over the last month, the first thing that it does, you install it, and there's an expert agent that analyzes the code base that you're installing it into. So the idea is that like it's like a thing that you install into an existing code base, and it will literally analyze the code base, produce an agent's file, a Claude file, a Gemini file for the agents that are working in there. It basically deconstructs the entire and it's the wild thing is like I tested it. I just like released a new version yesterday. I put it into a code base that I've been working on for like 9 months, dropped it in there, hit analyze. It ran for like half an hour. It spits out all of this stuff. Like it found like weird bugs. It was like, hey, there's some like issues with this thing, puts it all into a report. And then all the agents that are working on there now have access to this like memory of this agent that's run it. Right. And I think that idea of like a really good onboarding interview, like OpenClaw right now is still janky as fuck. Like you start it up and it gets confused. It's like halfway through onboarding and it goes down a rabbit hole of like installing SSH through Tailscale and gets confused. Like ideally you need an orchestration agent that sits there and like properly interviews you. What do you do? How do you do it? What's your life? Like really understands it, hands it off to a bunch of other agents that go and like execute these things, comes back. Like the multi-agent coordination stuff, I think, is going to be so much better. And then you're just talking to one guy, and it's offloading the information to a bunch of other people and a bunch of other agents, getting them to execute it. And it'll just be like, oh yeah, that's my agent, right? It knows everything about me. It knows, you know, it knows what I do. Like right now, OpenClaw, it feels like it's a lot of work to get it to understand you. And it's not that hard to just improve the interview process and spend the time to really understand the thing. Like spending an hour, the analogy that I've used is like if you were to walk into a software consultancy 5 years ago, they're all dead now, but you walk into a software consultancy 5 years ago and you say, I've got an idea for an app, or like I run a business and I need a platform to support this business, right? It would be wild if 10 minutes after you walk in, like people are writing code. They like you spend 2 days, 3 days. They come and visit your office. They talk to your team. They gather requirements. Like there's a whole process that humans do. And of course, you can short circuit that by using agents because they're faster and, you know, they can pick things up better. And you know, maybe it only needs a day, right? But your OpenClaw should spend a day with you, following you around, seeing what you do before it starts trying to like YOLO things, right? And this is, I think, what we will find is that people get much better at the onboarding process. It'd be like, hey, just switch on your microphone and let me walk around with you. I'll listen to everything that's going on. I'll figure out who's who. Like, oh yeah, your husband's this guy. I know about him. You got 3 kids. Like, it'll like work out everything about you, and it'll just be much more effective. But at the moment, it's like 2 minutes in, it's like, oh, what are we cooking? And it's like, we're not cooking anything, bro. Like, just slow down.
Yeah, I much look forward to the day where I can just show my girlfriend, show my mom, hey, talk to this agent, quote unquote, virtual assistant employee. I don't even need to tell them that it's AI, and they just think I hire someone for them. That would be the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you for all the alpha that you've given us, especially on agents. And I think it's next 18 months. I don't even give it that long. I think even now, if you have the technical expertise, it's definitely the time to start to pick up OpenClaw, start 100%. Trying it. Yeah.
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Your agent will be managing your crypto for you. So don't worry about the crypto side. Your agent's got it. We're going to train up your agents. We're going to get them cooking for you. Get the best agent you can. We'll make sure that agent knows how to do crypto.
That's the way. Let's do it. The agents are going to be the trading team for everyone. I think
100%.
I can feel that coming very soon. So let's get into what you guys are doing with agents at Infinex. So you mentioned you are integrating Agentic finance. Just walk me through the whole thing. I mean, I'm totally new to how OpenClaw can even be applied to kind of crypto on-chain trading use cases.
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of people who have been trying to figure this out. How do we let agents do stuff on chain in a safe way, right? It's one thing to be like, hey, here's my Gmail API key, go nuts, right? Or like log in via OAuth or whatever, and let it go through your emails. Can't do that much damage, right? You can then give it access to like your bank account. Okay, maybe you could do some damage there, but like it's TradFi, right? You can roll shit back, it's fine. You give it access to an ETH account with a bunch of ETH in there, and like all bets are off. If it sends it to 0x dead address, like that's it, it's game over. So figuring out how you put guardrails around these agents and how do you give them all the tools that they need, but without kind of constraining it is a difficult problem. The interesting thing is Infinex, the way that our platform is set up is actually very well structured for letting agents access it, right? The way that our custody model works, the way that our backend systems work, we have a bunch of very well spec'd tools, these TRPC routes that are accessible to the platform. And agents, it turns out, are very good at decoding these kinds of interfaces and going, oh yeah, okay, that's the balances interface, etc. And so what we built is an MCP server with like a very thin CLI around it that agents can access. And it's just like uses JSON output, and they can sort of sit there and grind on it and like figure out all of the different things that they can do. So it's almost like a tool chest that you can access as an agent, right, through an Infinex account. But the most valuable thing, I think, for people who want their agents to be doing things is you actually have the ability to put constraints around it. So you can set something up where you're like, okay, my agent can propose a transaction, but I need to actually approve it, right? And my agent can only transfer $100 a day, right, out of the account. So there's all of these different guardrails that you can put around it. Whereas you give an agent a private key is root access, sudo, right? It can do everything. So there's no constraints, and building a thing that puts constraints around a private key and what it can do is non-trivial. We've been spending 2.5 years building this. So I think we're in a really good place to make this available. The other cool thing is all of the benefits that you get as an Infinex user, gas abstraction, chain abstraction, etc., agents also love, right? Like the agent just has a job that it wants to do. It doesn't want to have to figure out like, how do I construct a transaction on Solana and then figure out how do I construct a transaction on Mega ETH. It just knows it wants to buy a token on Mega ETH and it wants to buy a token on Solana, and it just wants the tool that can kind of give it the interface to do that. So I'm pretty excited about when we're hopefully going to ship this fairly soon. And then the next question is, and interestingly, about a year ago, we built an agentic trading interface into Infinex, and it was petrifying. Like you just couldn't ship it. It was like it would say crazy things. Like the models were just not there yet, right? Like it would say crazy things, try and do crazy shit. It would had no idea what was going on, and it was like just too risky to ship, basically. Now, almost a year later, we're actually in a place where it's much, much easier. And so my expectation is step one will be give, and this is one of the things that in the open source world, I think as a crypto person who's been doing open source stuff for a long time, is really easy to grok, right? You need to make the tool that you're building agnostic of the upstream, tools that people are going to be using with it. So you can't just be like, oh, okay, we're building a Claude code thing. right? It has to be agnostic of like, is it OpenClaw, is it Codex, is it Claude Code, is it Kimi, is it Grok, is it, whatever. And that means like building a very kind of like agnostic layer, right? Like it's not opinionated about who's using it. It just assumes that a smart enough agent will be interfacing with it and can figure it out on its own. And that's what we're working on. And I think that will probably become the primary way that people interact with their Infinex account. Is they'll say to their assistant, whether it's a Gemini powered assistant inside of Siri, right? They'll be like, hey, I want to buy this token, and it will go and figure out, oh, okay, yeah, I've got this tool, right? This MCP server that I can access that has Infinex access, and it can go and do the thing, and it'll go and do the transaction and come back and either ask for approval or execute it itself, or it could be OpenClaw, or it could be Claude Code, or it could be any of these things, but it has to be like an open framework that you're giving access to. If it's closed, then it's not going to work.
That's cool. And I think this year, the way I feel after using OpenClaw to manage even my day-to-day and just the business flow, aside from anything touching with money and touching crypto, I think it's smart enough. It has the context that if I tell it to do something, it's not going to hallucinate randomly. Yeah. And I think that's key here. It's no longer just, replacing a button switch to swap with text. Rather, it's you can be pretty, direct, quick about it, and the agent will know what to do. So as long as you give it the right.
Yeah, you give it the right tools, the right interfaces. MCP servers are great because it goes, oh, okay, I've got 5 tools. Like I can figure this out, as opposed to go and construct a transaction on chain. I'll give you a really concrete example of something that is much better for an agent to do with a set of tools than for us to try and build. DCA, right? So you're like, okay, I think for the next 3 months, we're going to go sideways on Bitcoin, and I just want to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin every day. But you don't want to buy the top every day, right? You don't want to just buy like a random amount, right? You're like, if Bitcoin drops by like more than 1% on the day, go and buy the $100, right? And you're like, I want to buy the dips for the next 3 months. You plug that into OpenClaw. OpenClaw runs a cron job, right? Checks the price of Bitcoin, goes, oh yeah, it's down 1% today. It then goes and finds the best price, right? It goes and gets a quote. That quote could be through any number of venues, right? Like it's not constrained to a single venue. So it goes, oh yeah, Near Intense has the best price on Bitcoin right now. And I've got my USDC that's sitting there for my DCA, right? And it goes and executes the transaction. And then it comes back and says, hey, we bought our $100 of Bitcoin today. And you're like, oh yeah, nice job. I forgot about that. I was like doing stuff, right? And then the next day it wakes up and it goes, oh, check the price of Bitcoin every hour, checks the price of Bitcoin, checks the price of Bitcoin. Oh, Bitcoin's had a little dip, execute the transaction, and then it reports back to you. And it says, hey, we've now done 2 days of DCA. This is our cost average price. To build that into an interface is non-trivial. Like it's actually painful because you have to account for like so many things of what does a person want to do. Whereas now you have this generalized interface called an agent that what if you don't want to buy Bitcoin? What if you want to buy ETH, right? Or what if you want to buy like some like Sol or whatever? The agent can just figure that out. Like you can give it a direction like, I want you to buy ETH or Sol, depending on the ETH Sol ratio, every day at midday, right? If the ETH Sol ratio is above this, then I want you to buy ETH. To build that interface is fucking painful. Like it's really not like an easy thing to do because you have to have every nuance of like what the person wants. Like why ETH Sol ratio? Why not like ETH BTC? You can just say, hey, agent, if it's a full moon go and buy Bitcoin. And if it's like, waxing givers, go and buy ETH. And it can be like, okay, cool. And it wakes up every hour and it checks the moon chart and goes, oh yeah, okay, it's time to buy ETH, right? And then it goes like, we're not going to build a moon chart into Infinex that you can but it has all the information about the world. It can go and ask a question. You can literally say to it, hey, go and check the sentiment on X. I just saw this morning X is like fixed up their API, right? So you can literally chain a bunch of agents. You can say to it, hey, spin up Grok, ask Grok, what's the crypto sentiment today? Are we bearish? Are we bullish? Whatever. And if it's bullish, then you sell. If it's bearish, you buy. And like literally every day it wakes up and goes, hey, Grok, like what's the sentiment? Grok goes and checks. It comes back, reports back and says, oh yeah, we're giga bearish. It's like, all right, let's go. Buy, load up, back up the truck. And so there's things like that you could never build into an interface that all of a sudden you can build, by giving the right set of kind of precursor tools that an agent can construct together to get the right outcome. Go and check crypto Twitter sentiment, go and check the moon chart, go and check, whatever the BTC ETH ratio. Based on those things, we're going to make a decision and we're going to buy ETH or BTC or we're going to sell.
That's very interesting. That is the original promise of the ChatGPT for trading. But now it's here. I can talking to my Grok, I can let my OpenClaw do it right now and say Bitcoin dominance. If Bitcoin dominance goes up for today, let's buy some altcoins.
Yeah.
Who else is gonna be able to do that on an interface? I mean, it needs like a trading view script. It needs like all the API access, and then it needs to find the venue. And if it's not available, it's not going to retry by itself. So, and
exactly.
It has,
just give it the base tools, right? Give it the tools, and then you can construct whatever you want, right? And if the tool doesn't exist, like on one thing, it can figure out, again, like Grok can go and find out, like, is crypto Twitter bearish or bullish, right? Like you can just have Grok spin up and check sentiment and come back and report back.
This is very cool, and this brings some ideas to my mind, because you said earlier that it needs to be a general framework and general tool that can plug into everything. Because like before, when people try to build these ChatGPT for trading, it's all in one. That means even if they have a good crypto interface, but they need to be able to tap into all the Oracle sources, and they try to do all of these in one platform, like an Oracle style, it's never going to work. Whereas now, because you can run these OpenClaw machines and whatever framework come next in its virtual desktop or your own Mac Mini, you only need the basic tools, and then everything else just comes from Google, Brave Search, Grok, whatever else, TradingView, CoinMarketCap. It just has it. It just needs one MCP interface, and you're done. And then you can do whatever type of trading. You don't need another startup to say, hey, I can trade for you using proprietary algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. It can you can construct your own kind of trading strategy. But I think the most important thing is it's easy to make a trading strategy, right? Execution's the hard part. Like for the last 15 years of crypto, you got to manually click buttons. And you have to manually click buttons because, unless you've got API trading on like a centralized exchange, there's just not good interfaces to trade on chain. Now you have a good interface to trade on chain that is agentic, this agentic finance, right? And you just say, hey, go do this thing or this thing. Another great example is like rebalancing a lending position, right? One of our investors, the thing that he asked for that we were never able to build because it again is just not an easy thing to build in the right way, is he's got a maker position, he's got an Aave position, and he just wants to rebalance them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis automatically based on whichever one has the highest yield. And like that's, we've got DeFi Saver. There's things out, there's interfaces for doing this, but he doesn't want to have to click buttons himself. He just wants the thing to figure it out. Like, just rebalance it. Look at how much. What's the delta, right? So you can imagine a strategy where it's like, if the interest rate shifts by more than 30 bips, if the delta of interest between these two things is more than 30 bips, and the cost of migrating the position is less than X, then execute the trade. Or even like slowly rebalance, right? Move 10% of the position over to this new thing and wait and see, like a slow shifting rebalance, right? Depending on how big the position is. And you don't need an interface now. You just tell the thing, this is what I want to do, and it can do anything as long as it has the underlying tools. That, I think, is going to be something that is going to blow people's minds, that they can just go, hey, like, rebalance my maker position, or if I'm about to get liquidated, go and sell this thing in this order, sell this first, this first, this first, and rebalance the position, and get my collateral ratio back up, right? As opposed to manually scrambling around trying to figure out, like, what am I selling to protect this position.
These kind of things were only possible before if you had a dedicated person on clock trying to do this every day or twice a day.
Yeah, a team of traders. Yeah, you needed a team of traders to execute things, or you needed to be, back in the old days, DeFi summer days, you just didn't sleep. You slept like 4 hours a night, and you sat in front of your computer for 20 hours because you couldn't risk even a moment of like missing a new yield farm or a new opportunity. That was like a 4-month window where like I barely slept. I was sleeping like 2 hours a night. I was sleeping in shifts. I would like go to sleep for 2 hours, wake up for 8 hours, go to sleep for 2 hours. It was crazy.
Wow, it's hard to imagine what these agent stuff can do once they really have the full tool set of doing things on chain, and when people can actually trust it enough so that they have this final approval step.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we went super deep into the agent rabbit hole. I think it's safe to say that you guys are heavily leaning into this, the growth curve of this just starting to accelerate. So maybe just for our last closing thoughts here, if Infinex succeeds, and let's say 1 year from now, the full growth curve of agentic finance and really what an agent even is, with its own machine, the fact that I can access everything, and it's no longer just within Claude Code or ChatGPT, but it's really full-on virtual assistant or full-on trading team. What changes about people's experience in crypto day-to-day that you plan to achieve with Infinex by providing the tools?
I think the interface that people will be interacting with, at least for the medium term, like short to medium term, the next 2 years, will still be this chat interface. Like maybe with like voice notes or dictation or whatever, but it will be telling your agent to go and do a thing and having it report back to you, right? People will very quickly go, why am I clicking buttons on an interface? This feels weird, right? Just report back to me. It's not perfect and it's a little clunky, and we're still figuring out what this new form factor is. But like the idea that you move a mouse around and click buttons is like not going to last long, I don't think, when these agents are smart enough to just do things more quickly for you and you just tell it what to do. Given that shift, right? The expectation will be that you can just tell your agent to do stuff with your crypto. And so if you can't, you're going to be really frustrated. You're going to be like, why am I doing this thing? And so I think even for crypto to maintain parity with the rest of the world, we need to find ways to safely give agents access to people's crypto accounts, and manage it and give them, the ability to propose transactions. You can imagine an interface where it goes, hey, here's a proposed transaction, just checking with it, and you go, yeah, approve, done. Like a multi-sig, but inside the agentic loop. That sort of thing, I think, will make crypto so much more accessible, because you now have abstracted away all of the complexity, right? It's just another tool that your agent, and everyone will have an agent or multiple agents. It's another tool that your agent has access to, that you can just say to it, hey, what's the best place for me to get yield on my dollars, right? And it'll be like, well, actually, you should put, USDT into Aave. And you'll be like, I don't know about that. And I'll be like, no, it's actually fine. Like, here's the breakdown. And then, people will be like, oh, cool. I didn't realize I could get, whatever, 7% yield or something like that on Aave, or put it into Athena or whatever. Spread it out across these different things, rebalance. Like, the agent will just be like, no, I've got this. I know how to do this. This is the best solution for what you're trying to do. Let me do it for you, right? And it'll open up a whole range of people. And again, people, in the next 18 to 24 months, right? People who have agents will still be kind of early adopters, right? But you can be an early adopter and not know everything about every bleeding edge thing, right? Like, you can be an early adopter on this agentic trend, but that gives you generalized skills across like all of these different things, right? Crypto, equity investing, whatever. And all of a sudden your agent's like helping to manage your entire portfolio. And it's like, no, you should allocate some to Bitcoin. The trend looks pretty good. Like, I think it will genuinely open up a much larger group of people that previously would not have spent the time to understand how crypto works, what they need to do, etc. But their agent knows, and their agent goes, yeah, I've got this. Don't worry. Like, let's set this up. We'll put a little bit of money in. They start dabbling. They go, oh, this is actually not too bad. And it's kind of this like slow onboarding of people to crypto and probably initially stable coins and stablecoin yield. That's going to be the primary driver, I think. But once people are comfortable holding stable coins, then they're going to go, what else can I do? Like, what are some other things? And it'll be like, should buy some ETH.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here, Kain, and look forward to interacting with you more and chatting more in the future. And of course, the future of Infinex, fully agentified. Please keep us updated on the latest things you're working on. And I'll leave show notes for Infinex and any sort of research that you want to share with us. Please send them to me, and I'll leave them down in the description below.
it's easy to make a trading strategy, right? Execution's the hard part. For the last 15 years of crypto, you got to manually click buttons. You don't need an interface now. You just tell the thing, this is what I want to do, and it can do anything as long as it has the underlying tools. The inside of like Ralph and OpenClaw and continuous Claude and a bunch of these tools was these agentic loops are where like the massive gains are. Interesting thing is, as the models get smarter, these agentic loops get better. There will not be a broad market agnostic rally in alts ever again. I think in the next cycle, when we whenever it is 2027, right, we'll bottom out at some point this year, right? Probably grind sideways for a while, have some kind of capitulation, then we build up from there. Let's say Bitcoin goes to 35 to 50K, something like that, right? Towards the end of this year, there will not be next cycle. I'm pretty confident of that, seeing what's happened this cycle. There will not be a broad market agnostic rally in alts ever again. And that's what OpenClaw, the inside of like Ralph and OpenClaw and continuous Claude and a bunch of these tools was these agentic loops are where like the massive gains are. And once you build something like a harness that harnesses these agentic loops, the interesting thing is, as the models get smarter, these agentic loops get better. But I think the most important thing is it's easy to make a trading strategy, right? Execution's the hard part. Like for the last 15 years of crypto, you got to manually click buttons. And you have to manually click buttons because, unless you've got API trading on like a centralized exchange, there's just not good interfaces to trade on chain. You don't need an interface now. You just tell the thing, this is what I want to do, and it can do anything as long as it has the underlying tools. That, I think, is going to be something that is going to blow people's minds, that they can just go, hey, like rebalance my maker position, or if I'm about to get liquidated, go and sell this thing in this order, sell this first, and rebalance the position.